Students, welcome to the EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Krishnendu Ray, teaching in the Department of Ancient Indian History and Culture, University of Calcutta. Today, we have come to know how the king preserved the kingdom. And in that context, we are specifically, or rather I should call it technically, the title of the topic is Diplomacy, Espionage and Interstate Relations under the early Indian polity. Preservation of the kingdom is the sole objective. That is the sole aim, master goal, which is to be realized by any means. And how to realize it? And in that context, we have to learn certain objectives which you are also getting from this module. What are those? Number one, framing policies for the preservation of the kingdom. How? Security policy, policy for the settlement of rural and urban areas, emergency taxation for financing the state, policy for maintaining the interstate relations. These are the specific objectives, but students, you must remember one thing essentially, that any kingdom contains both countryside rural areas as well as urban areas, and both these areas have to be kept under watch and control by the king. If not possible, then the kingdom will be lost. So, if in order to maintain the kingdom, preserve the integrity of the kingdom or territorial integrity of the kingdom, we have to understand how the king framed policies in order to ensure its security for the kingdom territorially as well as the people thereof, that is the proja. So, how we have to be introduced with this? Let us see. First of all, the people, what actually, students, you must remember one thing. What we today learn or read in the form of diplomacy, espionage, these are later developments, but people have gradually come to these concepts. How? These are to be understood before we go into or delve into the later developments. So that's why I have arranged these things. You must know these before. First of all, the people needed defense or protection, as we also need. They selected the leader. The leader provided protection or safeguard in the interests of the common people. In order to ensure the leader or chief established his command over the people and the right over the resources. Students, you must remember one thing very carefully. Whatever you do, you must have in your possession some resources so that you can perform it. And exactly in the similar way, king also needed resources, and not only that, he had to establish command over the resources so that he could collect those resources and spend it for achieving those goals, his goals, political goals. So that is how he tried to establish certain policies, to follow certain policies. What are those? Before those policies, there were some ideological supports. What are those? That's why we have come to the next slide, ideology. Theoretically, we get the reference to the Chakraborty ruler. Students, one thing very carefully to be noted is we in different textual sources get the reference to the Chakraborty ruler. It means whole earth. No ruler actually became like this. So what we get in reality? We get in reality multiple kings with smaller, bigger or big or small kingdoms, territorial kingdoms. Naturally comes up the question of establishing a kingdom or acquiring a territory or a kingdom in order to territorially augment power and authority. Whenever a king established a kingdom, be it maybe it was a small, maybe it was a big, but at the same time the king also tried to augment his power and authority territorially. It means, in other words, king tried to conquer another land, and that is how comes up the question how to maintain what he had got and how to retain or how to conquer what he had not conquered. So that is how comes up the question of how to maintain security as well as interstate relations. So even to maintain the kingdom inherited and the kingdom recovered, historically we find a good example. Ashok Maurya inherited a great kingdom. How to maintain it? He did try to maintain it. So this is how a king may inherit a kingdom or may recover. You know, in the case of the Palas of Bengal, Mohipal first, he recovered a kingdom, a part of the kingdom that his forefathers had inherited or established. So this is how historically we have examples how the king recovered the lost kingdom or how the king established the kingdom, and that's how comes up the question of maintaining interstate relations or maintaining security for the people as well as the kingdom. So this is how we come to the next point. The chief or lord became the Raja. That is the Raja, that is individual who was capable to lead the people, to provide protection or defense. He became the Raja. After that, this led the Raja to establish his power and authority territorially in the form of a kingdom, or what we may call the king's dominion. King's dominion, the area over which king's authority was supreme. That is the area, that is the domain, that is the kingdom, that is, you may call, empire also. It was essentially an area over which was under the authority or command of the king. But at the same time, you must remember one thing. The king never became the sovereign, because sovereign king means there was no other king, only one king. But there, in early Indian history, we get number of kings. Each tried to become the sovereign king. That was their policy, part of policy. But at the same time, when they tried to do it, tried to achieve it in reality, it means they invited wars, they invited relations, they invited interstate relations, and they also tried to maintain what they had got, resources and other things also. So this is how we have to understand one more thing, how to settle urban and rural areas in order to establish the integrity or the security of the kingdom that he had established or inherited or recovered. So what is that policy for preservation? Number one, security policy, we have already told it. Policy for the settlement of rural and urban areas, emergency taxation, we have already told you that any kingdom contains two parts, country parts and urban areas. Both areas have to be secured, have to be maintained. And in that case, king always required finances, resources, not only finances but also other resources, both human as well as non-human resources, so that the king could maintain his kingdom. What next? So security policy. How to secure? What to be secured? No, only the kingdom, only the people, and not other things. What we get? We get the king's personal security. Remember, if king dies, then no other things will exist. So king has to remain, has to be alive, has to maintain his security. So king's personal security, essential for ensuring the protection of the kingdom. Security against the princes, security against the officials and other kings through the social secret agencies or agents. Security against the loyal and disloyal people. Because in any kingdom, all the people are not or do not remain loyal to the king. There may be some people who are disloyal. So they may cause the destruction of the kingdom. So security always to be arranged against them also, so that they cannot raise their heads against the kingdom, against the king. So security has to be maintained accordingly. Next, security against the thorns, which to be eradicated. Thorns means, in Kautilya Arthashastra, we get a clear-cut reference, Kantaka Shodhan, that is, thorns to be eradicated, to be removed. Thorns may be disloyal people, maybe tax defaulters, maybe other people, maybe enemies in different forms. All these are thorns, all these are considered thorns to be removed for the security of the people of the kingdom. So we have to be very, very careful about their whereabouts. Next, security of the kingdom, of the king and the kingdom. This is how we have to maintain the security policy. Policy for the settlement of rural and urban areas. We have already told you that every kingdom has two parts, and country or rural parts provide the supplies, provide the resources which are needed by the people of other areas, as well as the urban areas also to be settled, so that they can move with their merchandise or other things, and also the king can move from one place to the other with streets and other things to be organized within the space demarcated from what we get or what we call the rural space. This is how for the policy for the settlement of rural and urban areas, the villages to be settled mostly with Shudra cultivators, families numbering between 100 and 500. How to be areas to be settled with Shudra cultivators? Because Shudra families will cultivate resources, paddies, etc., etc. They will supply and prepared fields to be given to the farmers, so that they can get an incentive from the government, that is the king, and try to produce what other peoples need. Next thing, loans to be given. Loans means not only money but also other implements maybe. All those government supports to be given to the farmers, so that they can cultivate lands, cultivate other agriculture, they can produce agricultural goods, products. Agrarian products will survive, will be supplied to the other people through the states organized in the geographical spaces. So what we get? Next time, irrigation projects to be undertaken, so that agricultural products may be plenty. Next thing, mines, factories to be worked out. That is, the hidden treasures to be brought out of the earth. And those are to be processed in certain factories, that is what is called workshops, karkhanas. And pastures grounds to be provided so that the cattle can be maintained in those grounds, pasture grounds. Then land and waterways to be open for trade. Just now I have told you, people cannot remain in isolation. They always seek association with others, connection with others, and this connection can be established or actualized by organizing streets, roads, national highways as we maintain today. They also needed these things in order to communicate with others. Next thing, for the uncultivable rural area settlement, there may be more or less the same measures as those adopted for the cultivable lands. Just now I have told you, if in the kingdom there are some uncultivable lands, those are to be brought under cultivation so that agrarian products may be produced more and more in order to feed the people of the kingdom. Then what we get? Settling the urban area, forts to be built in all directions. In our days also, we are making defenses. We are trying to defend our territory, our motherland. So they also try to maintain their lands, their kingdoms, by building forts in different directions. A town to be built in the middle of the rural area so that movement of merchandise could converge in one area. That area was technically called town, Nagara. Town, this Nagara or town served as a treasury. Treasury means there all agrarian products and other things converged, deposited and distributed from there. Next thing, the town to serve as the area for this sale of goods. Today also we do these things. The capital to be constructed with streets and provisions relating to administration, defense, trade and commerce and industry. Yet today also in our India we have number of capitals, capital towns with streets, lanes, roads, etc., etc. At the same time with provisions relating to administration, defense, trade and commerce, industry, etc., etc. What you see today, they also practice same these things in maybe in different forms, different modalities, but they also practice these things in order to retain or maintain their kingdoms. Particularly the king maintained this by doing all these things, by organizing all these things. What we get next thing, I have told you all already that king always required resources, always required finances, and today also our country leaders, our government takes taxes in different forms from us. Yesterday also the king did this, but in addition to what he had got in the form of taxes from different categories of people, he also might need some emergency taxation. Emergency taxation means pronoyo kor, and this pronoyo kor was mandatory for payment. Different categories of people, even prostitute was not spared. They were also bound to pay these pronoyo kor in order to financially support the king. What we get? References to be revenues to be collected from the farmers, traders, others at high rates. That is completely for the interest of the kingdom. At the same time, they had to pay these at high rates. That was once in one king's tenure, not twice. So treasury to be filled by force and fraud through secret agents. If king thought so that treasury needs some other money, some more money, though that more money, that extra money could be procured by the secret agents by any means, fair or foul. That was done by the king, by the state, and that was not illegal according to the theoretician of the early Indian political thinkers. And what we get? The Shamaharta, high-ranking officer, finance officer, say for example, finance officer today, Shamaharta, high-ranking finance officer, to solicit subscriptions from people on pretext. That is, for example, say government has organized a function in order to collect some money for the poor. This is completely a pretext. Actually, government needs some money for more purposes. That is how they were charged to pay in addition to what they had paid, usually the taxes to the government. Then what we get? Policy for maintaining the interstate relations. Now, so far, what we have seen that the king maintains the kingdom as well as the people thereof with the assistance of resources and other agents, secret agents, etc., etc. Now, king cannot remain in isolation from others. King always, I have told you just now, that king always tries to conquer another territory, augment his power and authority territorially. It means kings always on the making or try to annex another territorial kingdom. Therefore, how to annex? How to maintain its security? How to avoid failure in conquering another territorial kingdom? That is how, that is why one king has to maintain some relations. So what we get? Policy, in regard to the policy, following the sixfold policy, that is Shadgunas, Sandhi, peace pact, Vigraha, creating hostilities, Asana, remaining stationary, Yana, marching into battle, Sangstraya, seeking refuge, Doidhi Bhava, double stratagem. This double stratagem, what is this? This is actually one king wars with another king, at the same time maintains peace with another king. War and peace, both are being conducted, both policies are being conducted at the simultaneously. Hostilities with another king and peace with another king. This is called Doidhi Bhav, that is double stratagem. Dual strategies being followed, being pursued at the same time. What we get next? For having a work, Vyama, and all these Shadgunas, that is sixfold policies, to be followed for two major things. One, Vyamo, that is work, and for the result, that is Sham, that is what the king wants to do, wants to work. This aim or goal has to be achieved by following these six types of foreign policies or policies. So, now we come to the next point, categories and concepts of the interstate relations. In this case, what we get? Every state, every kingdom is based on seven elements, seven constituent elements which play a pivotal role in the making of a kingdom. What are those seven elements? Number one, Shami. Number two, Amatto. Number three, Janapada. Amatto means officers. Shami means king. Janapada means territory. Durga means forts. Kosha means treasury. And Danda means law, which rules. And last of all is Mitra, ally. Just now I have told you that no one can remain in isolation, even not you and me also. So we have to, we do need some others in our company, as our companies. King also needed these things, and that was his friend, that is Mitra. Number two, what we get? We get allies and enemies, Mitra, Amitra. Number three, power, Shakti, that is strength, and success, Siddhi, that is happiness. These three powers, material power, particularly royal treasury, and military, Prabhu Shakti, counseling power, Mantra Shakti, and the energy of the king, Utsaha Shakti. King must be energetic, otherwise nothing can be possible. So this thing is very, very important. Number three, thus the knowledge, revenue, and military of the king emphasized upon. Any kingdom, even today also, if the kingdom, the king does not have military resources and his energy or intellect, nothing will be possible. Even today it is also true. You can understand it very clearly. And what we get next? All these things to be followed only for one thing, that is progress. In which direction? In which sectors? Let us come to progress. The sixfold policy to be applied for realizing the sole objective progress of the kingdom. The king is fixed, king is stuck to the sole objective, how to ensure progress of the kingdom and the people thereof. This is the sole objective that has to be achieved, that must be achieved by the king. Number two, progress to be sought through war, when the king thinks himself rich economically, militarily, and capable of removing the enemy's attacks, ruining the enemy's achievements. Number three, progress may be ensured by following a double program: the development of the king's own production at the cost of that of his enemy. Number three, strengthening the king's military and political position. We have already made it clear to you. And all these things can be possible if the king remains always in the know of all or what is going on within his kingdom, and this is possible, can be possible only with the assistance of the secret agents. This is why we have now come to the point espionage, that is secret agents. Who were the secret agents? Who served as secret agents for the king? They always collected different information from different parts of the kingdom, from different categories of people, and sent it to the king. And that is how the king remained very alert about what is going on in his kingdom. The people, what they were doing, everything. Now, who were those secret agents? Let us see. Number one, crafty students, that is kapotik. Number two, apostate recluses, that is udasthita, different, indifferent, as if one is vagabond, moving here and there, knowing nothing. He can be avoided, no problem. But at the same time, in that disguise, he is collecting information for the king. So this is how udasthita. Number three, agents working under cover as householders, grihopatika. And as if they are husband and wife, they are making their worldly affairs, grihopatika. But at the same time, under this pretext, they are collecting information for the king. Number three, merchants, boidehok, ascetics, secret agents, kshatri, techno, and poisoners. Like these, we have many categories of people who served as the agents of the king, collected news, information for the king. So they, in one word, we should remember that anybody can be an agent of the king. Anybody. If the king thinks so, he is responsible, he is useful, he may be an agent of the king. Today also we see many people may be agents. So what we get next? At this point comes the Potivedaka, that is from Ashokan inscriptions we get a reference, very important reference, Protivedaka. Potivedaka in Prakrit language, Potivedaka, that is Protivedaka. Even today also Protivedan is there, Protivedaka is there. That is news reporter. Yesterday also there were news reporters, but those reporters were meant for the king. They collected information, they served as reporters for the king, for the kingdom. Now what we get? The secret agents who move from one place to another in order to collect secret news, that is called charam, for the king, who were called mobile agents, sanchara or sancharin of the post-mortem phase. They kept watch over the high-ranking officials associated with the structure of administration. These officials were 18 in number, that is, all were government officers, and they were also kept under watch of the king through the secret agents. Now we come to the next point. Then we have to be care about have to be careful about the aims or goals of interstate relations. The king shall think the other kings separated from him and his allies. Foreign policies to be followed for the achievement of the principal goal, that is progress, I have told you just now. The king should promote himself from decline to equilibrium and then to progress. Goal of diplomacy and for the actualization or achievement of these aims of the interstate relations, the king needed diplomacy. So what is the goal of diplomacy? In the context of the use of the secret agents for maintaining the kingdom, as I have told you just now, we may refer to the useful policy of sham, conciliation, dana, that is gifts, danda, that is military force, and veda, that is dissension. All these things even today are also being applied. Yesterday also king applied in order to maintain his kingdom, the security of the people thereof. These means to be applied according to the requirements of the moment in connection with the kingdom. As the king thought, so he applied. As the situation demanded, so he applied. Sometime dana, sometime bheda. We know the case of Ajatashatru. He created dissension. It is told that for 30 years he tried to create dissension among the Bajjas, and after that he became successful. So here also we find the historical case of applying a part of this diplomatic policy, upayas. Now, period prior to Kautilya, what we get historically. These are textual references that we have studied or discussed up to this or so far. So what we get in pre-Kautilian period, according to the Teshakuno Jataka, that is a Jataka, particular Jataka, the goal of diplomacy to be trying to seek whatever, to keep whatever one possesses and trying to obtain what one has not yet obtained. These 5 bolos, that is forces, such as Baho bolo, that is in Prakrit, Pali language, Baho bolo, that is Bahu bolo, that is force, armed force, strength of the arms, Bhoga bolo, that is resources, strength of resources, Amaccha bolo, that is strength of officers, and Avijjachacha bolo, that is birth, whether he is of noble family or not, and that is sovereign or high birth, and Ponya bolo, that is Pragya bolo, that is the strength of intellect, that is knowledge. These 5 bolos are absolutely necessary for the achievement of the goals of interstate relations or other things. But these are seen not only in pre-Kautilian period, but also today also we can find it in different situations. Number 3, what we get in Kautilian period, we have just now detailed it in different sections, what we get in regard to the Kautilian diplomatic measures or interstate relations during the Kautilian period. What we next? Remember one thing, what we discuss in connection with espionage or interstate relations or diplomacy, often we rely on the Kautilian Arthashastra, but there were other texts also. They also knew what they have recorded. Let us check this. First of all, we come to Jagavalka. That is also a text, Sanskrit text, early Christian era, pre-Christian and Christian era tradition. What we get? Jacobolko has also supports the conquest of a territory and its annexation, just like Kautilyan Arthashastra always supports the acquisition of a territory, of a land, more important than gold, etc., and resources. Next, so he favors acquisition, preservation. Remember, preservation is very, very important. Kautilya also has told us to preserve what you have got. Preservation and augmentation. He also favors the adoption and application of gunas and upayas. Just now I have told you in connection with the Kautilyan Arthashastra. Now, what we get from all these long discussion, long lecture, we get essentially two things. Number one, we have to maintain the kingdom and the people thereof. We have to ensure security of the kingdom and that of the people. And for this, we have to take measures, steps, we have to apply those steps, and at the same time we have to change, we may change, we may adopt or change our policies, also act as and when the situation demands. Thank you for all these, but if you are interested to know more about these things, then you are requested to go through the reading list and e-texts. Thank you all.